Okay, turn to page 20, and we are going to pause the video here for you to do the warm-up. We will give you 5 minutes, and then we will go over the answers. So for all these problems, what I do to start is I draw my special right triangles, and I have my pi over 6 radians, pi over 3 radians, and I know across from pi over 6 is the short side, which is 1, across from 90 is 2, and across from pi over 3 is root 3. And then I'm also going to draw the pi over 4 isosceles right triangle, which is 1, 1, root 2. And then last but not least, I'm going to draw the quadrant of my unit circle over here at 0, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. I'm going to put a note to myself that all functions are positive there, sine, tangent, and cosine. And then lastly, I'm going to put the quadrant radius in. This is over 1 and up 0, over 0, up 1, negative 1, 0, and down here is 0, negative 1. Okay, so now I'm ready to start my 4 problems. So on our quiz this week, this is what I recommend you draw at the top. It's kind of like a brain dump, what you can get done before you even start the problems. So now sine of 7 pi over 6, what I'm going to do is find my pi over 6 angle, which is right here. So sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So this equals 1/2. But then I have to figure out, is that positive or negative? So I need to decide which quadrant is 7 pi over 6 in. If I come to my circle here, I'm always going to refer to 2 pi and pi. So 7 over 6, I'm going to think of pi as 6 pi over 6, so that I have a common denominator of 6. So in this quadrant, we would have 5 pi over 6, which is a little less than pi. And then in this quadrant, it would be 7 pi over 6, which is a little more than pi. So in this bottom third quadrant, only tangent is positive, so that means this is a negative 1/2. So now cosine of 9 pi over 4, come to my pi over 4, cosine is 1 over root 2, but we don't leave that with a radical in the denominator, so I'm going to multiply by root 2 over root 2, so that gives me root 2 divided by 2. Then I have to figure out what quadrant 9 pi over 4 is in. So 9 over 4 is more than one rotation. That's more than 2 pi. So if I do 9 pi over 4 minus 2 pi, so in your calculator you could do 9/4 minus 2. Leave the pi out so that you don't have the 3.14159 in your answer, because we just want how many pi's is this. So 9/4 minus 2 is going to give me 1/4 pi, or just pi over 4. Well, that's in the first quadrant here. So this is a positive answer. Okay, so tangent of 5 pi over 2. For pi over 2, that's on an axis, because if you notice, all my divided by 2's are here. So this is 1 over 2, 3 over 2. So to figure out where 5 pi over 2 is, again, that's more than one rotation. I'm going to do 5 pi over 2 minus 2 pi to find the coterminal angle. So in your calculator, you wouldn't type the pi's, you would do 5 over 2 minus 2, and you would be left with 1 pi over 2. So that is up here. And tangent, if you think about a right triangle, tangent is opposite over adjacent. So this is the vertical side over the horizontal side, or y over x. So if I do this y coordinate over this x coordinate, I would get my tangent answer. But we can't divide by 0. So tangent of 5 pi over 2 is undefined. So you'll see when we start doing the actual graphs of these functions, tangent is going to have some vertical asymptotes because there are places it is undefined. All right, and lastly, secant of 10 pi over 3. So I'm going to think this is the reciprocal of cosine. So I need to know cosine of pi over 3. This denominator tells me my reference angle. Here's the pi over 3. So cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. So the reciprocal is hypotenuse over adjacent. So that's going to give me 2 as an answer. But I need to figure out if 10 pi over 3 is a quadrant where cosine would be positive. So 10 over 3 is more than 2. I've run out of space here, so let me scroll down and figure out 10 pi over 3 minus 2 pi is going to be 4 pi over 3. So that's a little more than 1, because again, if I think of pi here as 3 over 3, 4 over 3 is a little more. It puts us down here in this quadrant. So this value is negative. Oops, I should do that in red. Negative. Okay. So another big part of trigonometry is the unit circle. I do not recommend you memorize the unit circle. It is easier if you draw, oops, hang on. If you draw the same guide pictures that we did on the front page to help us fill in the unit circle. So let me get my triangles back. Pi over 6, pi over 3, 1, 2, root 3. Pi over 4, 1, 1, root 2. And now we can fill, in everything. Hang on, I need a second to group that. All right, I can't figure it out, so I'll just move it as I need to. Okay, so for the unit circle, let me get my notes out of the way for a second so I can see the whole circle. I hope I can write that small. All right. Let's fill in the angles to start. Over here is 0 degrees or 0 radians. And then the smallest angle in degrees is 30, then the 45, and then the 60, and then 90. Let me get to the others in a minute. All the way over here is 180 degrees. At the bottom is 270, and all the way around is 360. So for the in-between angles, we're going to talk about the symmetries of the circle. So if I think about the 30-degree radius, the radius that's at 30 degrees, that matches with over here, and it's going to be, it's going to be the same as here. So all of these angles have a reference angle of 30 degrees. So now what that means is if I'm traveling around the circle, I would go 180 minus the 30 degrees. So this angle is at 150. To get to the next angle, I'm going to go all the way around 180 plus 30 more. So 180 plus 30 gets me to 210 degrees. And then for the last 30-degree reference angle, we would go all the way around 360, but back it up 30. So subtract 30, and that gives me 330 degrees. So for 45, those are all the middle angles. Let me highlight those in a different color. So that's this angle, whoa. And then this angle. And while I'm messing with the line tool, I might as well keep going and do the 60-degree reference angle. This angle, one more, and this angle. Okay, so those symmetries with these angles are going to come in handy when we fill in the coordinates of these x and y's in a minute. All right, so let's do all the 45-degree reference angles. The 45 degrees, so we would go all the way around 180 minus 45 puts us at 135. 180 plus 45 puts us at 225. And 360 minus 45, we're at 315. And now the 60 degrees, 180 minus 60, 180 plus 60, and then 360 minus 60 is 300. So those are all our degrees. Now we have to do the radians. Okay, so 0 radians, 30 degrees is pi over 6, 45 is pi over 4, and 60 is pi over 3. So now for all of the 30-degree reference angles, oops, sorry, I meant to do 180 is pi, 90 is pi over 2, and 270 is 3 pi over 2. Okay, so now for all the reference angles, I'm going to do common denominators. So because this is pi over 6, I'm going to think of this pi as 6 pi over 6. So I'll just write that over here on the side as 6 pi over 6. So to go back to the 150, I'm going to go a little less than 6 over 6, so that's going to be 5 pi over 6. To go to 210 is going to be a little more than pi over 6 pi over 6, so that's 7 pi over 6. And then over here, oops, I forgot, all the way around is 2 pi, so I can make that I'm going to make that 12 pi over 6 as a common denominator. So then to go to 330 gives me 11 pi over 6, one less than 12. Okay, so now let's do the common denominator of 4. So this would be 8 pi over 4, and over here on the right would be 4 pi over, left, 4 pi over 4. So 135 would be 3 pi over 4. 225 would be 5 pi over 4. And 315 is 7 pi over 4. And last but not least, we've got our pi over 3. So to make this 2, that's 6 pi over 3. Over here will be 3 pi over 3. So 120 is 2 pi over 3. 240 is 4 pi over 3. And 300 is going to be 5 pi over 3. Oops. Okay, so I'm pretty sure we have all of our angles filled in. All right, that was the hard part, I promise. Now comes for all the coordinates. For the quadrantal angles, those are the 0, 90, 180, 270, or the pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2. They're always a radius of 1 because it's a unit circle. So we're going to go over 1 and up 0. Over 0 and up 1. Over here at pi would be negative 1, 0. Down here at 270 or 3 pi over 2 would be 0, negative 1. And now for all the others. I'm going to use those two triangles I drew in the first place. Oh no, not things grouped together. Okay, let me bring those down for a second. That's a tragedy. Oh no, I'm so sorry. I wish I could be in class today. My daughter is sick and then she got me sick, so I'm sorry that I'm not there. So we're going to use our triangle pictures. Let me see if I can shrink. Oh, wait, I just got the grouping. Okay, I did the best I could. So I can move this down. Some of it has to go. All right, I'm frustrated. Here we go. Here's our triangle pictures. So for the pi over 6, for the x-coordinate, that's going to be root 3 over 2. The y-coordinate is going to be, sorry, I didn't have my pointer on. So for the x-coordinate, it's going to be root 3 over 2. For the y-coordinate, it's going to be 1 over 2. Now for the 45, or the pi over 4, use this picture. The x-coordinate is going to be 1 over root 2, which we know we have to change. So that's root 2 over 2. And now the same thing for the y-coordinate. So it's 1 over root 2, which is root 2 over 2. Yikes. And for the last angle, we're going to do the pi over 3. So the x-coordinate for pi over 3 is going to be the 1/2. It's going to be 1 over 2. And the y-coordinate is going to be root 3 over 2. It keeps moving the wrong thing. Okay. So, to fill in the rest of our coordinates, now we have everything we need. Because of the symmetries of the circle, everything with a pi over 6 reference angle is going to have these coordinates. So I can come over here to 5 pi over 6, and I can fill in root 3 over 2 as the x, 1/2 as the y, but now that we're to the left of the origin, the x-coordinate is negative. For 210, or 7 pi over 6, again, I'm going to have root 3 over 2 as the x, 1/2 as the y, but because we're to the left and down now, both are negative. And then over to, 11 pi over 6, again, it's going to be root 3 over 2 comma 1/2, but this time only the y is negative because we're to the right of the origin. So we can fill in the same for the pi over 4 and the pi over 3 reference angles. So do that along with me. And then for the pi over 3, we're going to do negative 1/2 root 3 over 2. So on the quiz, when we have you fill in the unit circle, it will be bigger than what I'm trying to do here on the screen, so that you can actually write in the blanks. So then the positive, negative, what that's saying is in this first quadrant, all of the functions are positive. In the second quadrant over here between pi over 2 and pi, sine is positive and so is its reciprocal cosecant. In the third quadrant, tangent is positive along with cotangent. And then in the fourth quadrant between 3 pi over 2 and 2 pi, cosine and its reciprocal secant are positive. So those are the positives. Everything else is negative if it's not listed. And I think that is it. We filled in the entire unit circle. Whew. All right, so page 22 is going to be the rest of your work. I will do the first 2 with you, and then you are responsible for the rest. All the answers will be in Drive this afternoon. So before I start, I'm going to draw my special triangles again. Oops, wrong angle. Okay, so cotangent of 7 pi over 4 for number 13. I'm going to think of that as the reciprocal of tangent. So I'm going to go to my pi over 4. Tangent is opposite over adjacent. So the reciprocal of that is 1. 7 pi over 4 is a little less than 2 because 8 pi over 4 would be 2. So that puts us in this quadrant. So that means this answer is negative. Okay, cosecant of 2 pi over 3. Cosecant is the reciprocal of sine. So I'm going to do sine of pi over 3 and find the reciprocal. So sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So that's going to be 2 over root 3. But, we need no radical in the denominator. So I'm going to change that. That equals 2 root 3 over 3, and then I have to figure out positive or negative. So 2 over 3 is a little less than 1, because 1 would be 3 over 3. So that puts me in the sine quadrant or the second quadrant, so this is positive. Okay, so your responsibility for the rest of class is to finish page 22. You can help each other. It is the homework tonight if you don't finish it, and we will go over it tomorrow in class. And I will most likely be checking it.